I've invited a friend to come and spend the last 10 minutes or so with me up here on the stage. And this is a unique guy. Come, Rich, and I want you to join me up here. I'm going to introduce to you Rich Stearns, who is the president of World Vision. And would you just give him a round of applause here? And the reason I wanted to have a brief chat with Rich is he was rich once. Rich, really rich once. And I want to talk to you, I want to talk with him a little bit about his life and about a decision he made along the way. And we're going to be challenged by this in this conversation the next few moments. So, Rich, I want to start by saying you didn't grow up in an affluent home. Tell us a little bit about the home you grew up in.
Well, that's right. Sometimes I say I was raised by wolves, but I grew up in a home with a father who was an alcoholic. He'd had 3 marriages and ultimately 3 divorces. Neither one of my parents went to high school. And when I was 10 years old, my whole world fell apart. My parents broke up. They got divorced. The bank foreclosed on our house. My father went bankrupt. And as a 10-year-old kid, I found myself just kind of drowning, wondering how I was going to survive.
In fact, we're going to talk in a second about a book that you wrote about some of this stuff. Yeah. But you actually, at 10 years old, were in bed one night and you realized, my parents aren't going to help me.
Yeah, I remember that night. I think all of us have those moments that you never forget. But I was a little kid, and my father had come home drunk again. And there was a shouting match going on in the kitchen as my mother screamed at him about being gone for 3 days and coming home drunk and not having money to pay the bills and all of that. And I just realized that moment that my parents couldn't take care of me, that they couldn't help me with my problems because their problems they couldn't solve. They couldn't solve their own problems. And somehow that night in the heart of a child, I realized that I was on my own, that if I was going to make it, I would have to do it without the help of my parents. And I kind of started to form a plan that when I was 18, I had this idea I could be independent and that maybe I could make my own way in the world.
And you weren't a Christian at the time?
I was not a Christian, no.
And so you just decided to do odd jobs, and you went on a letter-writing campaign to try to get into a school.
Well, that's right. When I was about 13 and other kids were dreaming of being a baseball player or a fireman, I got out an old Royal typewriter and wrote letters to all 8 Ivy League schools and asked for their catalogs. And I would sit in bed at night looking at the Princeton and the Cornell catalogs, dreaming that maybe someday maybe a miracle would happen and I could do that. And I knew somehow that education was going to be the way I could escape from this, that was the way out.
And you did wind up going to Cornell, and you got scholarship there, but you worked, what were some of the odd jobs as you worked through Cornell?
Well, I started at the bottom cleaning toilets at a nursing home. That's, if you want to start at the bottom, that's pretty much it, believe me. But I mean, I did all kinds of things. I was a paper boy in high school. I bagged groceries. I cleaned toilets. I worked at the country club and cleaned people's golf clubs when they were done playing golf. When I was in college, I drove a taxi for 2 summers, and I used to dream, my American dream at that point was someday I'd sit in the back of a taxi. I'd never sat in the back of a taxi. I was only the driver.
And then after Cornell, you took out some loans and went to the Wharton School of Business.
That's right. I went to the Wharton School and got my MBA there, and actually, and perhaps the only living person that became a Christian at the Wharton School, gave my life to Christ at the Wharton School. As you may know, they worship a different God there. Yeah. And but there I was.
Okay. And then fast forwarding ahead, you became the CEO of a fairly good-sized company when you were 33 years old.
That's right. I don't know if you ever saw the movie Big with Tom Hanks, where this little boy gets in an adult's body and he ends up being a genius at a toy company. Well, I got a job at Parker Brothers Games when I was 25, and when I was 33, I was named CEO and president. It was a $250 million company with about 1,000 employees. And it was partially because I still had a mind of a child, and I could figure out what games that kids wanted to buy, and was very successful at doing it.
And then a few years after that, you accepted the CEO position of Lennox Fine China.
Thank you, ladies. Thank you, ladies, for your support.
I don't know. I did a little research on this, but this is where the White House gets all of its china, and the embassies and places around the world. I mean, this is like really, I'm sure I have none in my house, is the point that I'm making.
Well, this is one of those places where ladies get an abundance of possessions, as you preached about. But yeah, it's America's Fine China and Gift Company.
Okay. So, I mean, at that point in your life, you were in your dream home?
You know, Renee and I was in my mid-40s, and Renee and I had bought a 10-bedroom fieldstone farmhouse built in 1803 on 5 acres. It was the house of our dreams. Everything was coming true in our lives. The American dream was coming true. I used to sit and have those discussions about I can save up enough money, and we can retire at 55 and go to Boca. And we used to have those conversations. Of course, my wife said, I'm not going to Boca. We're going to go on the mission field if you ever retire.
Ooh. Yeah.
I had a good wife.
Yeah,
You hear me?
No, those are long discussions, I know. So, all right, so you have this high salary, incredibly promising future, and then you get an invitation from World Vision to walk away from all of that. Mm-hmm. And to assume the presidency at a fraction of the salary and none of the perks. And when you got that invitation, what did you do?
Yeah. Well, as you might recall, because Bill was involved with this, but a recruiter called and tried to recruit me to throw my hat in the ring for this World Vision job. And I was going to have none of it. You know, that was dangerous. I didn't want to go there. I could feel the spiritual danger of that in my life, and the conviction that would come. And he wanted to have dinner with me and to meet me, and I said, I won't have dinner with you. You know, it's a waste of time. I'm not qualified. I'm not interested. And then he asked me this question, Bill. He said, are you willing to be open to God's will for your life? Now, if somebody normally asks you that question, you say, yeah, of course I'm willing. I'm a Christian. I'm a follower of Christ. I'm willing to be open to God's will for my life. But he asked me that question that day, and you see, behind that question are other questions. Questions like, are you willing to leave that career that little boy who grew up in poverty worked all of his life for to get there? Are you willing to give that up? Are you willing to give up the financial security that comes with it? How about that 10-bedroom house? Are you willing to sell that, put it on the market, have the moving vans pull up to it? What about that Jaguar XK8 that Lennox gives you to drive? Are you willing to hand the keys back? But even more questions. Are you willing to enter the pain of the poor? Are you willing to walk into the brothels of the world, the garbage dumps, the slums, the barrios? Are you willing to hold dying children in your arms? Are you willing to do that, Rich? Are you willing to be open to God's will for your life? And all of a sudden, that question is no longer a theoretical question. It hits you right in the stomach.
Yeah, and you write in the book that you courageously crawled under the covers in your bed when it was coming right down to the wire because you knew what God was.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I was being pursued by the Lord, and I just, you know, you have this question, what does God want me to do? You pray and you pray, what does God want me to do? Sell fine china to the wealthy or help the poorest of the poor? You know, and believe it or not, I was willing to believe he wanted me to sell fine china to the rich. And at my low point, I crawled into a bed. My wife and son were with me in Seattle. And I was just weeping and praying out to God at 4 p.m. in my pajamas. It was pathetic. And my 16-year-old son patted me on the shoulder and said, it'll be okay, Dad. Mom and I are going to go out and get a bite to eat. We'll be back in a couple of hours. Yeah. That's where I was. That was my low point.